Waiting now to see if everything works. So let me see if it continues. We're now streaming via Wirecast. So I hope that gives the same results as yesterday when we used the Twitch software itself. So I'm now trying to get everything in order. And there we go. So we can now watch the live stream and we have the chat open. So if you guys have Wirecast, so I hope that gives the same results as yesterday. There we go. Okay, so guys, if you are in the chat room, make sure to let yourself hear and then I can give you the answers that you need. So a while ago I did a really nice presentation for Tether Tools about tethering with your camera to your computer. We did it in Dutch and we get so many questions about that one, like, can you please do it in English? So today on Twitch we are going to do it in English for you guys. Now this is my second broadcast in Twitch. Yesterday we did it via the Twitch studio. Today we are actually doing it via Wirecast and it gives me a lot more options. Like for example, I can show you who your presentator is. In this case, that's me. So I can overlay certain things. I can of course also start clips and I can switch between different setups. So we are going to test that today. If it doesn't work, next time we are going to work of course again with the Twitch software, because with Twitch software we do know it works. Okay, so let's switch this back again. And again, on the chat room you can ask whatever you want. So let's start with the presentation. And as mentioned, it is about tethering. So let me first start out by why is tethering important and why should you tether? Well, one of the things that you will probably find out in the studio is that often your model or your client wants to see what you just shot. Like you take a picture and immediately they go like, oh, did it work? Can I please see it? This can be very, very frustrating because at that point you are out of your workflow. Now, if you have something like a tethering solution, what you can actually do is show your client, there's a monitor, there you can see, you can just work. And especially now with the 1.5 meter distance, and I don't know how long that will take, I hope not too long, it's very handy to have a big screen. There's also, of course, other advantages. For example, with Capture One, you can check if your focus is okay for your focus peaking. You can check if your lighting is okay. You can add presets. There's a lot of options for tethering. So let's go through them. And if you have any questions in between, just let them know in the chat and I will give you an answer to them, of course. Okay, so first things first, tethering. Okay, let's see what we're going to do today. We're going to do an introduction to tethering, tethering requirements, tethering with cable, wireless, and setting up your workstation, and of course educational resources. Hey, learning with Frank, right? Okay, so first the introduction to tethering. So what is tethering? To make it clear, for me tethering is every time you connect your camera to a display. So it doesn't have to be a computer, it can be a tablet, it can be your phone. Actually in the past, and I don't know if you go back that far, when we started out with photography for models, I found it very, very frustrating to constantly let a model look on the back of my camera. I was going like, I don't want this, I really don't like it. The thing that I did at one point, and I think that was really handy, was actually use one of those yellow RCA cables, get it directly into a monitor, turn the monitor upside down, of course, because you wanted to shoot portraits at that point, and I had my first tethering solution via a video. Later on, of course, you could connect your camera via USB to a computer or wireless. In the case of Canon, we had actually a wireless device, on a wireless grip. But it was very, very slow. But for today, we're going to talk about tethering that will actually connect your computer via wire or wireless to your camera or tablet. So that's tethering. Okay, so in other words, connecting a camera to a computer, tablet or monitor to instantly view images on a larger display. Right? Easy. Okay, so why is it important? Well, the first thing is, of course, you can view your images on a larger screen. Now, that's very important because sometimes, and I don't know if you ever experienced that, you think you're doing great, you think you're doing fine, awesome. We see all these beautiful images coming in on your display. And then you open them up on the computer, you zoom in, and the focus is off, or there's some chromatic aberration on the side that you didn't see in your lens. And, well, you can still use the images, but hey, it's not perfect. And if you would have known that on location, that's why you should tethered. Because with tethered you can zoom in on your images and can literally just pinpoint problems and solve them on location. The other thing is, of course, your creative collaboration on set. Now, what is that? Teamwork. There's no I in team, remember? Teamwork is very important for the creative process. You never know when an image is really working, or you never know when that really has that little bit of bite that you need for an image. By using tethering, you can very quickly judge with your whole team, do we like this image or do we have to change something a little bit? And take one advice from me, even listen to somebody that doesn't know anything about photography. Sometimes Enrique, for example, just jumps into the studio and goes like, hey, I really like that shot, but... Now, everything before but is bullshit, as you know, right? So just listen. What doesn't he like? He doesn't like, okay, I can change that. And then you end up with a stronger shot. And I think a lot of photographers are very much focused on themselves. And if somebody else tells them that it doesn't look right, it's my image. Don't. Listen to other people. Get that into that creative process, and then your images will become better. Composition and lighting goes very, very simple, right? You can judge your lighting better on a big screen and the composition. I don't agree on that one, because composition on a small screen you can also see, but hey, it helps on a big screen. Now the other one that's really important, color profiles and color correction. Now you might say, hey Frank, isn't that something that you do in post-processing? Yes, but when you work with styling, and especially with makeup, and for example conversions to black and white, it's incredibly important, almost vital, that you will actually see what you're doing with colors. So if a color doesn't really translate into black and white, for example red lipstick can be a terrible problem in black and white, then you can still adjust that on the set. Now, in all honesty, when you shoot digital, you can manipulate the heck out of a black and white conversion, but still it's very wise to do it on set. So when you tether, you get a preset for the black and white conversion, and you immediately judge the shot if something is right, or maybe if you change something in the clothing for colors. The other thing is, of course, increased workflow performance. What is that? Well, if you constantly have to stop and show somebody the back of your camera, that's very, very frustrating, and it totally takes the speed out of your workflow. So increased workflow is incredibly important, and when you shoot tethered and somebody looks at the monitor, they immediately can adjust things, or they can literally give stars on your computer. It's just a very, very nice way to work. File management, same thing. If you have everything on your card and you want to see something on the computer, you take out the card, put it, you get it right. It's very cumbersome. And know when you've got the shot. Well, in all honesty, I also know when I got the shot when I do this, but in a presentation it looks nice for a number 7, right? Know when you got the shot. I think what they actually mean, and I totally agree with that one, of course, I'm joking around a little bit with you guys, is that when you shoot tethered, you know when you get the shot for the very simple reason, you see it on your screen, but you don't have to see it, it's the client. If the client tells you, that's the shot, that's the one I want, then you know you succeeded, and that's actually the one that you will select for your customer. So that's when you know you've got the shot, but actually you know when the client gets the shot, right? Okay, so these are some examples. These are not my images, by the way. This is a presentation from Tethered Tool, so I'm using the same presentation we used in Dutch. But you can see the setups, right? These are setups that are actually pretty tricky to pull off when you also have somebody that wants to see the final result, or even for the photographer, if you're standing like a little bit balancing on top of something, and you go like, I don't know if this is right. By using the technique of tethering, you actually know you nailed the shot, and your client knows it. So very, very important. So what is your tethering requirements? Now, first, of course, you need a camera. Duh. You need a computer or a tablet, and you need capture software. Now, by the way, we have the chat room open. If there are any questions, feel absolutely free to ask. That's no problem at all. We are on Twitch, so there is no time limit. Okay, so the first thing you have to know about your camera is, does it have tethering capabilities? Now, you may or may not know that Enweek actually is Mrs. Tethered Tools for the Netherlands. So that means that we distribute Tethered Tools in the Benelux. And so we get a lot of questions from end users. They always connect us first. So they ask us like, hey Frank, we bought this, for example, the wireless kits. We bought a wireless kit and it doesn't work. The first thing we always ask the client, did you try to shoot tethered with a USB cable? In 90% of the cases we get the answer, no, we bought the wireless solution because it doesn't work with the There you go, right? If your camera isn't supported or doesn't support tethering, it doesn't by magic support tethering in another device. So make sure that before you start tethering, you go on the website of your tethering software or your camera and you find out if the camera supports tethering. Now in most cases, especially when you go to the semi-pro cameras, and the pro cameras of course without any doubt, they will support tethering, but sometimes you have to dive into the menus and change some stuff. Now I think the record holder is actually Sony, where when I want to switch between my wireless tethering and tethering via cable, I have to change 3 settings in the menu. On most cameras it's very simple, you just plug it in and it works, or you have to change it from P2P to mesh storage device if you want to use it as a card reader, and back to P2P or PC Connect or whatever they call it, remote connect, if you want to shoot tethered. So you need a USB port or Firewire. Nowadays it's almost all USB. USB 2.0, 3.0 or USB-C. Now, in all honesty, I don't like tethering with these kind of cables. Like, this is a cable that, I don't know if it will focus on it, but that's one of those really annoying small, and I don't even want to hold the camera. I don't even want to hold the cable. It's so fragile, it's so small, it breaks down when you look at it. Now when you compare that to a USB-C cable, which I don't have very close to me at the moment, but that's a very, very nice connection for tethering. First of all, it's a more solid connection. Second of all, it clicks in your camera a little bit better. And that's the main problem with those smaller connectors. They break very easily and they don't stay very nicely fit. So if you have the option, USB-C is very, very good. But always check your camera manual how to set it up. Don't panic if it doesn't work. It's often a very, very small setting in your menu. Okay, computer requirements. I think for most of the cases we can skip this for the very simple reason. If you have a computer that does Photoshop and that does Lightroom, it will probably support tethering, because let's be honest, it's not rocket science. It's not like you have huge raw files of 400-500 gigs that go through. It's 60-70 megabytes max, so don't worry about it too much. Most computers will do fine. Now, if you want to speed it up a little bit, I would advise a fast laptop with enough memory, like 16 gigs and an SSD drive, which almost nowadays is standard, I think, for better computers. And at that point, if Capture One runs and Lightroom runs, don't worry about it, tethering will be fine. Tethering software. Now this is very important because there's a huge difference in tethering software. And I know, I think I tried them all by now. So the ones that I know and which I absolutely love, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, is Smart Shooter. That works really well. Capture One Pro, absolutely amazing. Lightroom, Darkroom, Nikon and Canon's EOS Utility, and Sony Play Memories. I know there's also a software version for Fuji and Pentax, but I don't have any experience with those. The Nikon camera control is very, very simple. You can connect it and it works just the same with Canon. The Sony Play Memories is a little bit more complicated, but in essence it's the same. It's a very simple solution. You can do wireless tethering with the Sony software. I don't think it supports via USB, via Play Memories. You have to have other software for that. So there you go already. You know, there's a lot of people get confused with this. There's so many software options. So just relax and just type in tethering with your camera and then download. So the 3 that I really like and advise you guys to use is, first of all, Capture One. Capture One is a software package that's rock solid. It's a very good alternative for Lightroom, although I still prefer Lightroom for my images. But it's a very good alternative. It's very, very fast, and it's literally built to tether. It's a tethering monster. It's fast. It almost never ever loses connection. You can do live view. You have focus overlay, so that means that if you take a picture, you will see in your preview, for example, red or green, depending on what you decide that it has to be, and those areas are in focus or has the highest contrast. So Capture One is absolutely awesome for tethering. Lightroom, it's a mixed bag of beans for me. I love Lightroom, but the tethering is sometimes a little bit flaky. So when I shot with Canon, it often was like it connected and it worked fine, and then at one point it just didn't. all the cables were correct, the camera was working correctly, and the only thing you have to do is stop tethering, start tethering, and it worked again. Now, a lot of my attendees of the workshops don't have this problem, and a lot of them do. So, and it's Mac and PC, it's divided. So, I don't know what's going on, but something isn't really nice. Now, I hear from a lot of people that since the last update, so not the last update, but the one before that, it actually got a whole lot better. And that was also the same period when we started testing another thing that I really want to address to you guys, and that's Smart Shooter. Now, Smart Shooter is a little bit different from all the other software. Now, when you look at Capture One and Lightroom, let's look at those two. Now, Capture One and Lightroom, you could say are competitors. I don't really agree because Lightroom has a lot of stuff that Capture One doesn't have and the other way around. So I always go like Lightroom is where my images live, where I can do a lot with them, where I can use, for example, my phone and my tablet to use Lightroom CC or Lightroom Connected or Lightroom as it's called now. They keep changing the names. So at that point, Lightroom is awesome. When you go to tethering, Lightroom does a pretty decent job. When you go to Capture One, it's all tethering. It's 100% a tethering solution. It's blazingly fast. It's a great RAW converter. But when you go to the database, I still think that Lightroom wins there, hands down. So what is Smart Shooter? Smart Shooter actually is totally different. It doesn't do anything with your images. You can't adjust color balance. You can't adjust exposure or shadows or highlights. You can't put a logo in it. You can't do anything with it. Except for one thing, and it does that extremely well, and that's tethering. It's rock solid. It's even faster than Capture One. You literally connect your camera, it immediately recognizes your camera. You can do live view. The moment you click is the moment you see the image. Capture One, there's always a little bit of a delay, but with Smart Shooter, it's boom, it's there. Now, when you work with several photographers, for example in an event, you can shoot with several photographers. Smart Shooter also has an option for QR code. So if you're an event photographer, you shoot a QR code, and if your photo development center supports it, the client only has to use that QR code to get their images. So it's really, really aimed at a big level and big volume tethering, or guys like me. Now the cool thing is, I used Smart Shooter, but I always found it a little bit limiting because I like Capture One or Lightroom. And with the latest update, Smart Shooter 4, it's awesome. You now have a plugin for Lightroom, and believe it or not, you can shoot tethered with your Sony camera. So what wasn't possible before, for example, the Sony a7R4, I couldn't shoot into Lightroom except when I used the hot folder, which actually sucks in Lightroom. Now I can use exactly the same technique as with Canon or Nikon. You go to Start Tethering, you connect your camera, and it works thanks to Smart Shooter. So if you have a Sony camera and you like Lightroom and you want to shoot tethered, make sure you get Smart Shooter. And you can order it from us, by the way. We are also for Smart Shooter, the distributor for the Benelux. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the reason I promote Smart Shooter. It's actually the reason we became the distributor, because I saw it, I was going like, this is absolutely awesome. It's part of the Tether Tools collection of software. So we immediately grabbed it up and I'm using it myself and I'm absolutely delighted with it. It's highly, highly recommended, especially for the Lightroom plugin. Awesome. Okay, so Smart Shooter 4, very quickly. Mac and Windows support, high performance tethering engine, really fast, exceptional reliability. I can say without any doubt that's true. Automatic download and display, that's tethering. Shoot to camera, card, computer, or both. This is something that a lot of people are frustrated with, for example, Lightroom or Capture One, because they only shoot tethered to the computer. You can't store it on the card. Now, with Sony, there was a firmware update a while ago where you can actually select it in the menu, store it on the computer and on the card. But in the old versions and also with some other cameras, when you connect it to Capture One, it shoots to Capture One and it doesn't store on the card. It depends a little bit on the brand, of course, but most of the times. With Smart Shooter, you actually have the option inside the software. So that's really, really nice. And you have live view display, including overlay mode. So with live view, you can actually use an overlay. For example, if you have something that you have to shoot for a magazine, you can overlay that on your live view. So you can literally see how it will look in the end. That's something that Capture One, by the way, also supports. Capture One, fast tethering connection without any doubt. It's really, really fast. And color handling, that's something that Capture One is king. Color handling, without any doubt, although the new color grading in Lightroom is awesome, color handling in Capture One is a totally different ballgame. Asset management, it's okay. Camera control, awesome in Capture One. Live view, really good. Lightroom, Mac and Windows of course. Asset management, really, really good. Edit, organize, store and share, and easily integrated with other Adobe Creative Cloud software applications. Now, these are the three that I really like. Now, which one should you choose? Let's be totally honest. I think with most people, Lightroom is already on the computer. So just buy Smart Shooter if you have a Sony camera, install the plugin and just start shooting tethered and you're fine. You don't need anything else. If you don't have Lightroom or you hate Adobe for whatever reason, I always think it's ridiculous for the prices that Adobe charges. It's a steal, literally. Our bookkeeping software is much more expensive, and we even see some stuff on, what is it, some of those animations, you know, you can make in your images. Those charge more than the whole Creative Cloud where you get Lightroom, Photoshop and online storage. So I don't get it. But anyway, so if you have Lightroom on your computer, just use that. If you don't want Lightroom, I think Capture One is the perfect alternative. And if you are a big shooter like events or whatever, Smart Shooter is a no-brainer. And again, if you have Lightroom and a Sony camera, just use Lightroom with the Smart Shooter plugin. So those are the three software packages I really advise. Okay, so you have a camera, you want to start shooting tethered. What cable do you need? That's a little bit difficult for some people. In all honesty, it can be a little bit confusing because, well, you have the computer, of course, you have the camera, and all those things have to work together. And sometimes people don't know all the names of the USB controllers. So Tether Tools just made a very, very simple tool, search by camera. So you go to the Tether Tools website, make sure you go to the original Tether Tools website. And at that point, you just simply say, okay, I have this computer, I have this camera. And at that point, you can literally see which cables are compatible. As you can see here in the example for the Nikon D800. Okay, and they also give you an option, by the way, if it's compatible for the Case Air or Air Direct. Okay, tethering with a cable. So what do you need? The tethering application, of course, in the computer and your camera. And is it just a tethering cable? Well, we get that question a lot. Actually, when we started doing Tether Tools, a lot of people told us, Frank, I don't know if this will be a success because those cables are like twice as expensive as a normal USB cable, sometimes 3 times as expensive. Yeah, we know. So we decided to cut one open and show you guys the difference. The standard USB cable, and as you can already see, it's a pretty good USB cable. If you see the other one that I just threw out, that's a really, really tiny USB cable. If you look at a standard USB cable, so let's say something like this. This looks pretty sturdy, right? This is a really, really nice and sturdy cable, without any doubt. However, when you cut it open, you will see something like you see on top. And that's okay. It's great. You won't destroy something like this with normal use. You don't. But if you shoot tethered, and somebody walks over your cable, or you drag your cable through the mud or whatever, the cable get a lot of hits. So that's why the Tether Tools cables are a little bit different. And as you can see here in that example, they're really thick, a lot more wires and a lot more protection. So they're designed for high volume file transfers. Signal assurance, it's all nice words, you know, but in the end there's only one thing that counts. The cable on the top I need to replace at least twice a month. My Tether Tools cables I can use about 6 months and then I really have to replace them. So if that is the difference, the price difference is absolutely nothing, because I would spend a lot more on cheap cables than get one great cable. Yeah. So cables aren't really cables. There's really a distinct difference between them. Okay, optimal lengths and compatibility charts. As you can see here, I don't 100% agree with this slide, but it is for 99% correct. There are, however, some instances, and I'm one of them, where the placing of the tether extension kit actually is very vital. So what is a tether tool extension kit? You have to think about that the maximum length of a cable is about 15 inches. 15 inches? 15 foot? Probably 15 foot. 3 meters. 4 point... whatever. Guys, sorry. 4.7 meters, I believe. Anyway, there's a maximum distance that you can get with one cable. After that, you have to use an extension. Now, in most cases, you can just use 2 or maybe 3 extensions and then it will work fine. However, in my case, when I use 3 extensions, I get a lot of lost connections. I get a lot of problems with transfer. Sometimes it just seems like nothing is coming through, and then at one point everything is coming through. It doesn't really work. Now, in the past, they had a booster. So you had to place the booster in between, put a battery pack on the booster, and tape it all up, and then it worked fine because you needed a little extra boost. Now, that big booster is being replaced by a very, very small cable, and that actually works like a charm. However, if you get that cable and you follow the instructions you see on this slide, sometimes it won't work. So experiment with where you place the booster. We found that on some laptops, the booster actually has to be placed at the laptop side and not in between the cables. Sometimes it's also in between the cables or on the second cable. So if it doesn't work at once, experiment a little bit with the position of the booster. You will be fine. In the end, we connected, I believe, a maximum of 4 cables and it still worked with one booster. 3, no problem at all. 4, I wouldn't go there. But man, you're talking about so much distance at that point that probably you need a very big screen to see your screen. So normally 1 or 2 cables is no problem at all. Put a booster in between and you're fine. Okay, so what are your connections and how safe are those connections? Now, when you look at your camera, that little port on the side is incredibly fragile. And when you break that port, it's game over for the camera, it's game over for your shooting, and it's probably game over for that new fender that you want to buy. For the very simple reason you're out of money because the repairs are very, very expensive. So what can you do to protect it? Well, the first thing, and that's actually how we got to know Tether tools, was the jerk stopper. What's in the name, right? And the jerk stopper you connect, as you can see in the first slide, you connect between your camera and the USB cable. And what it actually does, it makes sure that if you stand on your cable and you yank on the cable, that it actually takes away the power of the USB port. So it can still mean that your jerk stopper will break, but at that point it actually did its work and the port will be okay. Now, if you go like, hey, the jerk stopper, that's nice, it's a cheap solution, it works fine, but it still jingles around a little bit and sometimes it wiggles the cable, I don't trust it. Then get a tether block. The tether block is the one on the second slide, and that's the one I also use. That's something you put underneath your camera and you route the cable through. And the nice thing about the tether block is that there are also versions that function as an Arca mount. So if you have a tripod with an Arca mount, you get one of the tether blocks with Arca mount and you can fit it on. And the other cool thing about the tether block is that it also has holes for other accessories. So you don't have the tether block on there and you're stuck. If you have another connector, you can actually just screw it underneath. So it's a very, very nice solution. It's not cheap, but it works like a charm. Now on the computer tablet side, we also have solutions, for example, for flat mount or clip-on. Now, in all honesty, on the computer side, you can do either. Both. You can do both. They work fine. There's not a real difference. Now, what I do advise you guys is if you use one cable only between your camera and the computer, I wouldn't use any protection on the computer side. Let me explain. If you use connection on both sides and you stand on your cable and you pull, one of those things has to fall. And in all honesty, I think on the computer side, you can make sure that your computer is, for example, on the floor so it doesn't fall down, or it's lower, or whatever. You can protect the computer, I think, a little bit better than the camera, which you're holding in your hand. And when you yank on the cable, the camera will probably drop down. If you have 2 cables, that's perfect, because at that point, the breaking point is in the middle. So when you stand on the cable and you yank it, it will actually disconnect in the middle. So that's when you actually start using the flat mount and the clip-on, in my opinion. Some people use it with one cable and they never have any problems. I'm the kind of guy that probably will connect it and will destroy both my camera and the laptop. So. But in all essence, they're really, really tight and secure. Okay, then let's go to wireless tethering. Now, this is something that a lot of people want, a lot of people dream about, including me. And sometimes it's a disappointment, but it shouldn't be. So let me explain wireless tethering. Let me first get a little bit of drink. Okay, now the wireless tethering solution that I use is called the Air Direct. Now the Air Direct is a little bit of a bigger device. It has great antennas and it has a separate battery on top, a Canon battery. So when you run out of battery, you just switch over the batteries and you can continue tethering. So you don't have to connect it to USB to charge, which can be really frustrating. Especially because they promise like 6 hours of work on a battery on all devices. And in the end you end up with maybe 2 or 3 if you're lucky. So you connect your camera to the Air Direct or Case Air with a USB cable. Now you have to make sure that you mount, of course, that device also on your camera. From that point on, it will make literally a Wi-Fi network which you can connect to on your phone or on your laptop. It doesn't matter, or tablet. Now that's not all. The problem is when you have that connection, now in most cases you need software from that manufacturer to start shooting. Now one of the things that I really like about the Air Direct is that it creates a virtual USB connector. So what is that? In essence, the computer thinks and believes the camera is connected via a straight wire, so a USB connection. And that gives you a lot of extra options. For example, if you like Capture One, no problem at all. If it works with the USB cable, it will work with the Air Direct. If you like Smart Shooter, same thing. If it works with the cable, it will work with the Air Direct. So there's no compatibility issues. The only thing that's incredibly important, and I also made a video about that one, is the connection method. Now if you're using a Mac, I really advise, and also for PC maybe, to do a full restart. So just restart your computer. Now the first thing you do is, of course, you power on your Air Direct and of course your camera. At that point you connect to the Wi-Fi network of the Air Direct. And then you start up a little app called Edu. Now as soon as Edu tells you connected, and that will be an instant, only then you start up Capture One or Lightroom. A lot of people do it in a different way. They just start up Capture One or Lightroom, they do the whole process with connecting the camera, and then they are surprised that it doesn't work. Remember, it's a virtual USB connection, so before you start up your tethering software, that USB connection has to be made. That's the only way it will ever work. So that's the main problem. So why do I say a full restart on Mac? A lot of people think that when you press that little red bulb, it will actually closes the software. It doesn't. It only minimizes the software. So you really have to close the software. So a reboot is just the best option, and it's really fast. Okay. So Air Direct, very, very nice. Here you can see it on the hot shoe. And of course, the first thing I hear you go like, hey Frank, this is a studio setup. How did they trigger the strobes? In all honesty, when I look at this image, I have exactly the same question. Maybe they use continuous lighting, right? What I do, I use an L bracket. So I have an L bracket on the side of my camera. I place the Air Direct in it, and then I still have, of course, my hot shoe left for my triggers for the strobe. So it's a really simple solution. But in this case, when you look at the image, you go like, where should I put my triggers? Well, you can place the Air Direct or Case Air wherever you want. Just use an L bracket or put it underneath your camera. So there are many options. Okay, features for the Air Direct. As you can see here on the side, you have mobile and Edu. If you want to connect to an Android or iOS tablet or phone, you use mobile. If you want to connect it to the computer, you switch it to Edu. You also see that it has an option for 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz. I advise to use 2.4. I know that 5 GHz sounds way more interesting and way more fancy because it's faster. In the end, you end up with a lot of problems with 5 gig if you are a little bit further away from the computer. 2.4 goes straight to walls. Also on this distances, you get a great performance. So just use 2.4. It's way, way safer. Okay, it's compatible with Canon, Fuji, Nikon, Sony, Olympus, Panasonic, Lumix, Phase 1, Hasselblad, Leica modules with USB tether. In other words, if you can shoot with USB, you can use this device. There's one thing that I think is really interesting. They deliver all the cables from the camera to the Air Direct. So they're in the box. So when you buy it, you don't have to go to a store to get cables. It's in the box. The only cable you have to buy is, I believe, the cable for Phase 1 or Hasselblad. So those are a little bit different cables. That's the one you have to buy. But in essence, when you have a cable from that camera to USB-C, it will work just fine because you have to connect the Air Direct via USB-C. So very, very simple solution. Okay. Case Air, that's a smaller version, as you can see here. This is, I always tell people, like, if you're a professional and you want to get into tethering, get the Air Direct. If you are more like, hey, I want to tether sometimes, get the Case Air. It's a lot cheaper, and it gives you a lot of options. So it creates a secure Wi-Fi network, connects to your camera to your device, computer or phone, doesn't really matter. And you can control your camera and transfer images. You need an app, but it works fine. So you can't make that USB, that virtual USB connector. You can still shoot, of course, into Capture One via hot folders, but it just works. Great, but the Air Direct is a little bit more professional, but you pay for it. Okay, now setting up your workstation. Cabled, as you can see here, they just give you some examples, and I left it slide in for very simple reasons, and the reason is the tether table. Now, a lot of people question me about, hey Frank, what do you use when you shoot tethered on location? Do you use an Apple box? I actually started using the tether tables I think a few years ago, and at first you go like, hey, why do I need a tether table? The nice thing is it's very, very lightweight. When you look at the competition, it's often a very, very heavy table, and the tether table is something you can literally just put in your bag and fly with it. Not this year, but we hope that next year and the year after that we can fly again. So you just put it in your bag, and it's very, very lightweight. The other thing that I really like is all the attachments you can put in it. Like, for example, I like when I'm shooting, I like to drink something. So where do you leave your glass, or where do you leave your little flask? Your bottle, of course. Hey, where do you leave your bottle? Well, when you're shooting on the beach, you will get a lot of sand in your glass or in your bottle, so you don't want it. So they have a little cup holder. Nice. But also, when I'm on location, I want to make backups. So where do I leave my hard drive? Very simple, as you can see on the image there. You have the hard drive next to your computer, underneath. Now, of course, you also want to power your laptop via a via a power bank, or maybe via an adapter, but you don't want it laying on the floor in the wet stuff, right? Okay, look at this. Look at the screen. They use a wrap more to keep the power supply there, or your power bank. So everything can be connected to that one tether table and your tripod. And that total solution, that really gives me the option for working on location and not destroying my gear and not getting sand in my mouth when I want to drink something. And let's be honest, when you want to take a drink, you're next to the computer because you want to see stuff, right? So it works fine. Okay, here we have some other options. You can also shoot to, of course, your iPad or Android tablet. They have options for that, like the little mounts for your tablets. They also have mounts, of course, like a T-bracket for camera and laptop. And I have to be honest, that's the stuff that I don't use, for the very simple reason. I always have my camera in my hand. I hardly ever use it on a tripod. But if you're, like, for example, a headshot photographer, the one most on the right is your setup, because you have your laptop, you have your camera, everything very, very close to each other. You can make backups right away. That's really an awesome solution. And by the way, if you wonder, the tripod, what are those wheels? The lowboy roller. So you can just put your tripod on, just mount it, and then you have wheels under your tripod. Trust me, that one is used a lot in our studios. When you watch Digital Classroom, and you see the cameras moving, that's actually because they are on lowboy rollers. So we actually put them on the brakes, and when we need to move the cameras, we don't have to pick it up. You can literally just remove the brakes and just move them around. It's a really handy tool. Okay, same here, wireless tethering. You can use a Case Air or, of course, the Air Direct. And on the Fuji, you can actually see that they mounted it on the side in an L bracket. So that's really nice. And here also some wireless workstations. Now, in all honesty, it's more to show the products that they sell as to really give you ideas about the setups, because I think for a setup it's so incredibly personal. When I look at, for example, the setup with the tablet on the tripod, I really like it. I really like the power bank on the side, but then I look at my own workflow and I go like, I never use a tripod, so why? But then when I look at the one with the Mac next to it, that's one that I use a lot on location. So you have to really figure that out for yourself, and just know that when you go to Tether Tools, they do have the products for it. So that's no problem at all. Okay, so what do I recommend for starting? It's actually literally what you see here. If you're starting with tethering, just get a good cable, get a good bag for the cable, especially the Tether Tools bags, which I really like, have that opening in, so you can literally see what's in the bag. And you might wonder why. Well, I don't know if it ever happened to you that you pick up a bag, you feel it's heavy. Oh yeah, everything is in there. You go to location, you open it up, and you miss that one. And it's always the vital piece, right? It's never the piece where you go like, oh, I don't need it. It's always the piece that you need. So having a little window in your bag, it sounds incredibly stupid. You can literally, it's there. So you can just pick it up like that. Now, of course, also the ones on the side where you can literally, I don't know how they call it, but the Velcro are very, very handy. So to make the cables nice and connected. And of course, the tether tools and jerk stopper. And for wireless, if you want to start out, just get a Case Air wireless. They're pretty cheap and they work like a charm. If you need that USB virtual connection, then go for the AirDirect. Okay. Now, educational resources, very simple. Just go to my website, and we have some other stuff, of course, for tether tools, like a tethering guide, commercial photography, and how I got the shot. Those are tether tools which you can actually get. And I believe, by the way, that this isn't a proper slide, so let's just leave that. I think Tether Talk is now integrated into the Tether Tools software, Tether Tools website. Okay, so let me see if there are any questions in the chat room about tethering, and I don't see any questions in the chat room. Okay, so in all essence, what is tethering and why is it important for me? Let me recap that for you guys. For me, having a tethered solution, let me just close down my, because I think you see the reflection of the monitor in my glasses. And when I'm full screen, that's a little bit annoying. So I think this is better. Okay, so by using a tethered solution, you are literally connecting your camera to a display. Let's not make it more difficult than it is. You connect it to a display. You can do that wirelessly, or you can do it via wire. That makes it possible to show your images on a big screen, to judge your images, to make sure that your client sees the images, but most importantly, that you know that everything is in order before the client leaves your studio, and also the client has a good feeling about it. Now, there are some problems, and let me just address them one by one. The first thing is, can you shoot RAW while shooting tethered? Yes, of course. Why not? Over the cable. Now, as soon as you go to a wireless solution, you can still shoot RAW, but the main problem is when you shoot RAW and you shoot like me, for example, fashion, I shoot pretty fast. At that point, the RAW files are a little bit too big to be transferred over the air in a nice and orderly fashion. In other words, it takes too long. But if you're shooting, for example, still lifes, it works fine. You just press it, or maybe you do it via remote control. You wait for 5 or 10 seconds, the RAW file comes in, you can judge it, you can change stuff, you shoot again, you wait for 10 seconds for the RAW file to come in, and it works fine. In my case, I need my files actually there within a second. So what I do is I set my camera up for RAW plus JPEGs. Now the JPEGs I set up the smallest size and the highest compression. That means that when I press my shutter, almost immediately the JPEG shows up. We actually timed it in the studio. It's almost as fast or even a little bit faster than shooting RAW via a wire, which is logical because the files coming in from my camera are like 2 megabytes. And over Wi-Fi, 2 megabytes, that's nothing. That's immediately there. So you can shoot RAW, but you have to do it on the card. Now, I hear you asking like, hey Frank, but when I have a client with me and I'm shooting, for example, in Lightroom, and he gives 5 stars to all the images that he likes, how do I make sure that when I empty the card, I know which are the 5 stars? Because sometimes there's a little bit of a difference and I have to look at that. Don't even worry about it. Think about this. And this was one that actually bugged me a lot until I figured this one out. Don't delete any images that are coming in. So if a client doesn't like an image, just give it 0 stars. When he likes an image, give it 5 stars, right? Okay. Now, as soon as you're done with the photo shoot and the client left the studio, you empty your card and you sort everything on time code. It's very simple. You can do it in Lightroom, you can do it in Capture One. In every single software package, you can literally sort on timestamp. Now, when you sort on timestamp, you only have to find one image, which is the same than the 5 stars. Is it on the left or is it on the right? As soon as you know it's on the left, you just go to the 5 stars and the image on the left, you give 5 stars. Image on the left, you give 5 stars. And now you can just delete all the JPEGs and all the RAWs will be there with 5 stars. The nice thing is the next time you shoot, it will also be on the left side. But do make sure that you check this, because if there's a software update or whatever, I don't want to be responsible for that. So it's a very simple solution. It works like a charm, but at first it also bugged me a little bit. Now that I'm used to it, it goes just as fast. The only disadvantage is I can't do retouching during a workshop because I don't have the raw file. But in that case, I just send over the raw file. The other question we get a lot is, of course, like, hey Frank, if I start shooting tethered, isn't there an issue that my model constantly keeps looking at the monitor? Like, hey, I have my model perfectly for the camera, and then it goes like, oh yeah, I like that shot. Okay. Yeah, there's a solution for that. If you find out that your model constantly keeps looking at that screen and going like this, and you go like, hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. Just keep shooting. Don't say anything. Don't frustrate the model, because you have to make sure that there's a connection between you and the model. So don't say anything. As soon as you're done with the set, you place a flag between the monitor and your model, so she can't see the monitor. At the moment that you start shooting, she will go like, hey, I can't see the monitor. You go, yeah, that's okay. We have to do that for blockage of light. Or just figure something out. Another way, of course, is just make sure that she never sees the monitor. So when you start shooting and your model is here and you are here, place the monitor like here, so she can't see it. Now, some models with us, during the workshops, we just have the monitor behind me, so the model can see what she's doing, and it goes fine. But those models are used to a tethered solution. When I work with a new model, I very quickly find out that a lot of the models will be fine, and some models are like real turners. They go like, and that's the point where we start turning over the monitors, or just have a good conversation with the model. Like, hey, when you do this during a workshop, this doesn't work. Don't look at the monitor, look at the screen. Look at me. The problem is you can't do that to a client. To a model, that's somebody that works for me during a workshop. So in essence, it's my employee. It's not really that, but you have a working relationship. So if I tell her, don't look at the monitor, she has to do it, right? With a client, that's a little bit more tricky. So when you shoot tethered, I would really just advise you guys to just turn the monitor away from the client. So the sitter doesn't see it. Your client, often the art director, he or she can see the monitor. So that works fine. Okay, no questions in the chat room. That's awesome. We don't announce the Twitch broadcast, but we do, of course, save them also to YouTube. Okay, for now I would like to thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions about tethering, leave them in the comments below on social media or of course on Twitch. And I would really appreciate it if you bring some people to our Twitch channel or of course our YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel you can actually find here. So at that point, we really appreciate it if you send some people over there, because every subscription, of course, helps. And we try to do live streams regularly and, of course, upload Photoshop tips and whatnot more. So Twitch we use for the more non-planned, non-linear, non-themed things like Q&A or guitar streams or just portfolio reviews and whatnot more. And YouTube is more like planned for a date. We do it that date and it's a fixed time period. For example, Digital Classroom is 2 hours and we try to keep it within that 2 hours. So it's more like a structured. And Twitch we try to do a little bit more free. So we have also more time to interact with you guys on the chat room. So again, thank you very much for watching, guys. See you again in the next stream. Bye bye.